So this is a situation where this advisor was not anywhere near retirement age. He came over to the same broker dealer that I am at about 2.5 years after I did. I had known him at our original firm, not well, but once I saw he'd come over, I reestablished contact and we'd have lunch periodically and talk things over. Unfortunately, he went through some things in his life that made him ready to sell way before age-wise you would expect. When stuff happened, he understood kind of how I did things, and I was a natural choice to be one of the people he talked to when he wanted to potentially get out of the business. Bottom line is I was there. We had the conversations. He decided it was a good fit. I decided it was a good fit, and we started to discuss the details. So because he was young, one of his concerns was generating income, at least to get him to a Social Security age. So in this case, that was somewhere around 4 years. This is right after the DOL announcement. That was another thing that I think put him over the top in being ready to talk about selling. Just not wanting to have to change his model after what he'd gone through in his personal life. And, I could see the benefits of his business, primarily because I knew he had good relationships with his clients after talking to him for a while. Some interesting details about the situation. So it was about a $15 million practice. So again, nothing huge in the big scheme of things. I had about $45 million of client assets at the time last year. So meaningful to me, a pretty nice addition from a percentage basis to my practice. So $15 million, 100% brokerage, mostly A-share mutual funds. So his last full year revenue was somewhere around $120,000 gross revenue. Only about, because of the mix of the business, only about 25% of that was recurring. I envision what would be possible with a more advisory focused practice. So with 15 million of assets, I like to be conservative when I'm projecting the results. So I figured without too much trouble over time, that should generate about at least $100,000 of recurring revenue, that kind of business. Obviously, it could be 150 or more if you're even getting 1% a year. But again, I like to assume low when I'm making this kind of commitment. The beauty of buying a practice when you're independent, and I don't know how, I don't think I can overstress this, is once it's paid off, obviously you're going to add some work in supporting new clients. But let's say that $100,000 of recurring revenue, hypothetically, that is all new income. Bottom line is $100,000 of new top line revenue is a big deal. Now, the big caveat there is that's after the deal was paid off. So there were a couple things that were important to the seller here. He wanted to make sure he had some income, so he was fine with zero down payment. So far, my experience with sellers is they're not necessarily worried about a huge chunk of money up front. So even better in this situation is I was able to do this with zero down payment, and we came to terms at a total buyout price of just over $200,000, which when you have recurring revenue of only $30,000 or so seems high. But again, if you apply a typical market multiple to the recurring and the non-recurring revenue, so you say you say $30,000 of recurring revenue, $90,000 of non-recurring revenue, and you multiply those by, for the recurring side, say somewhere between 2 and 2.5 times, and on the non-recurring somewhere between 1 and 1.5. You get pretty close to that number depending on which multiple you apply to both sides of the business. But I think he was pleasantly surprised. In his words, it basically took price out of the equation as a concern for him. I wasn't trying to lowball him because I knew him, I trusted him, I knew he had good relationships that were at their core more advisory-like. So I thought that the transition to advisory at some point, as I developed my relationship with the clients, would be very workable and reasonable and well received. Another big variable that has been extremely helpful for me is the seller was, because he didn't have or wasn't going to have other income streams, and is a fairly modest spending guy. He doesn't have a lot of overhead personally. He was willing to take payments as 1099 payments. So as a practicing business owner, self-employed person, being able to deduct the payments day one or the same year it's going to be great for me while I'm making these payments, because that's just right off the top of my income. A lot of times the seller's going to want capital gains treatment. I think the reason in this case the seller was willing to take a 1099 was, capital gains are generally going to be at 15% if you're selling a business. In his case, I think he's probably going to be in the 15% tax bracket anyways with this income. He's going to use some personal savings and other sources that don't generate a lot of taxes. So when we discussed that and I kind of mentioned that, he agreed, yeah, that would be fine. And as I let him know, that allows me to pay more because I can take the deduction. So I'm saving a pretty healthy chunk on taxes. So that's where I think laying out, here's what I'd like to do and here's why. Here's how it benefits you, Mr. Seller. And here's how it benefits me as a buyer, and therefore I can afford to pay you more. I think that's the kind of conversation you want to have, ideally, with a seller.